Hey, and a very warm welcome to the Into the LightWeb podcast with me, your hostess, Joanna Hunter, metaphysical teacher, spiritual life and business coach, published author, and the high priestess of the LightWeb, a spiritual technology that will change your life. This is the place to be to talk everything under the LightWeb, from consciousness, relationships, to money, to spiritual business, and everything in between. Hey, on today's episode of Into the LightWeb podcast in the $1 Million series, we have one of our first guest experts. And this woman is incredible. Her name is Laura Powers. She is in the top 100 podcast for Apple Podcasts called Healing Powers. She is the author of 8 books and travels full-time for clients and televisions and media appointments as a medium and psychic. So she is going to be here today in the studio to help us really connect with our intuition. She has also recently been interviewed by Will Ferrell on his Ron Burgundy podcast. So celebrity medium and psychic, actress and model, Laura Powers. I am joined by the gorgeous Laura Michelle Powers today, who is an intuitive expert, celebrity psychic, actress, and all-round multi-passionate entrepreneur, which we love them here at the $1 Million Lab, because so many of us are multi-passionates. So I'm so excited to share this interview with you. So we're going to dive right in. And hi, Laura, come and introduce yourself.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I'm so excited to be here. I love you and your energy and everything you're putting together. So yeah, I am most known as a psychic. I grew up as a little kid being very psychic and intuitive, clairvoyant specifically, and saw spirits and things. It was very confusing for me. It took many years for me to really figure out and kind of unpack everything. But basically, I saw ghosts as if they were live people in some cases, very much like the kid in The Sixth Sense. Yeah. And I really just thought I was crazy for a long time, because I would see someone and they'd do something like walk through a door or fuzz out. And so I remember asking my mom when I was very young, I think I was probably about 7 years old, if she saw things. And I knew based on her response that she just didn't know what I was talking about. And so I just basically kept it to myself and just really tried to manage all these different things. But I remember looking around at people and just feeling like a total alien, like being like, I am not like these people, and just feeling very strange. And then also being really worried about that and what that meant. And then as I got older, I tried to ignore it, kind of block it out, and fast forward many years, and basically ended up just in a really bad place in my life. And I went to a psychic just to try to figure my life out, because I was in a toxic marriage. I was physically ill, on sleeping pills. My job had ended due to the recession, so unemployed, didn't have money, was pretty hopeless as a whole. And I went to the psychic just try to figure things out. And she basically, of course, without me telling her, said, you're really psychic. When you blocked out your abilities, you blocked out your intuition. It's really important for you to open that back up. So that really started the journey for me of opening up back my intuition. I started to have incredible things happen right away, an angelic visitation experience. And then I started taking classes and learning how to purposefully develop this and face these things that I had been really afraid of. And then my life transformed from there. So I'm really passionate about teaching people about this, because I literally went from like this major rock bottom in my life to having a really incredible life after I learned to listen to my intuition and not be afraid of it.
Oh, wow. I've not met many people who have got a similar childhood to mine, where I was the same. I saw spirit people as real people. I often say I couldn't tell the living from the dead.
Yeah.
And so it's really bizarre. And people say, well, when did you realize you were psychic? And it never went down like that. I just realized everybody else wasn't. I was like, oh, what do you mean you don't see the colors around everybody? What do you mean you don't see these people that do weird things, that walk through walls? And and it was because that was my normal. And then of course at that age you just want to fit in.
Yes,
and you squish it all back down. But I'm finding more and more people, as I share that part of my story, I'm finding more and more people are kind of like, yeah, I kind of remember seeing things as a child. I think so many of us have repressed psychic abilities and things. Do you find that as
Yeah.
well in your practice when you're meeting people and things like that, that they sort of start to have recollections of like, yeah, I did see stuff as a child, but then, I kind of just really push that back down?
Absolutely. I think generally as children, that people see things a lot more. You're kind of closer to the other side, literally. And then what happens is I think as people get older, they start to realize what other people see or sense, or kind of what's acceptable, what's not as acceptable or talked about in society. And the thing is, as we focus on things, they get stronger or sometimes they fade into the background. And so I think that happens for a lot of people where they had this, but they kind of, if you don't lose it, you lose it kind of thing. The one exception to that is if it's like a major part of your path and your purpose. Like as I got older, it actually amped up. And like when I was a adolescent and then a teenager, it got really strong in college as well. And then I really made a conscious decision when I was in college that I'm like, I'm going to try to shut this down. It's just too much for me. And at that point, it did at least get majorly minimized. I still saw and sense things periodically, but it was much, much less. But I think that's pretty common for most people to be very psychic as a little kid. They kind of realize it's not as accepted or it's not talked about or it's not trained in them. And so it just kind of fades out.
Mm.
And then as adults, if you get training, a lot of times these things really start to come back. So I love teaching psychic development and helping people access that stuff because it's really so life changing and empowering. Anytime we shut down any part of ourselves, whether that's our emotions, our psychic abilities, I just think that's not good. It's like we're not using our whole self, all of our abilities, and then we don't have access to everything we have access to. Like we're only manifesting at a lower percentage of what we're capable of when we don't tap into all of ourselves.
Oh, I love that. I think that's really juicy that when we're not tapping into all of ourselves, that we're manifesting from a kind of lower level. And
Yeah.
isn't that true? I mean, in my own journey, it was, I kind of fought it, and it wasn't. And when I was about 23, I was like, well, I can go through my whole life not using my left arm, or I can accept that I have a left arm, and my left arm happened to be my psychic abilities. And I thought I can accept them and harness them and use them instead of having this sort of, because my psychic abilities by this point just felt like this kind of appendage that I tried so hard to ignore. And
Yeah.
and in the end I was like, I've just got to go with this and start training. So I started training mine at 23. And almost immediately, I mean, by that time I'd already read tarot for 8 years. So I started when I was
Wow.
15, so really I kind of went from starting to open the spiritual gifts, and then it was like the minute I opened the door, it was like bam, they were there. And then within 6 months I was teaching tarot, and I was teaching, and and people were coming, people that were training me were coming to me saying, Joanna, what do you think of this? Or they were coming to me for readings. I was kind of like, oh, okay. And so it's I think so many people suppress it, and it's not talked about, and stuff. And I love that, yes, you are not being the fullness of your vibration if you
Yeah.
don't accept all of what you are. And I really believe that everybody can train a psychic ability. Would you agree with that? Would you feel like everybody can kind of pull something out, whether it's just low level intuition or full blown like mediumship, that there is that sliding scale, if you like, but everybody has the ability to access some sort of intuition? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's very much like a range. And, just like everyone can create some kind of art, or nearly everyone can, do some form of dance or, athletics or whatever, but not everyone's going to be like a world class pianist or an Olympic athlete. Or I think it's the same with psychic abilities. Everyone has some. The thing is, there's some people who don't realize how much they have because they've just never tried it. Like we don't get the psychic ABCs growing up. And so I think this would be a completely different world if we had some very basic tools that we gave everyone as children. And I would love to see that change, like to have that transformation in the world, because I have students all the time that come in and they're just kind of curious and they just say, I just want to check it out. And they don't even think of themselves as psychic. And then we start to do exercises and they're super psychic and get like incredible things, but they just have never really tried. So, for people that are listening, like if you think you are, you definitely are. But even if you don't think you are, you probably have something, and you just need the opportunity and some practice with it.
Yeah. I find the opportunity in the practice, and if you're brand new to this world and you're like, what are they even talking about here? Let's kind of go into, so I have a scale. The scale that I use is the first level is intuition. So intuition for me is kind of like, it's a beautiful sunny day. You're walking out the hallway and you look at the umbrella and you think, I should really take that. And then you don't. And then on the way home, you're like splish splashing in your flip flops, going, ah, should have taken that umbrella, right? Like that's the low level stuff. Then we move into like psychic. So that's just like, I don't like that person. I don't know why. I just feel bad vibes here. And then maybe a month later, even 2 months later, all is revealed. And you're like, ah,
Right.
I knew it. That's more a psychic ability. Then you can get a random thought that just kind of pops into your head like a knowing. And you're like, whoa, where did that come from? I have no idea. That's what I call the universal level. So that's like basically the vibes are in the ether. And then the final level is mediumistic, where you literally just know that that person's father or uncle or somebody in their loved ones, one of their loved ones, comes through to you as like, you have this sense of like, I have their dad in spirit here. And you bring that, and then the levels of mediumship obviously go up right into kind of trance mediumship and physical mediumship.
Right.
So I see that all as one scale. And if you're right at the beginning of that scale and you're wanting to develop that intuitive part, which I also believe that the intuitive part is really connected to the physical body. And then,
Absolutely.
would you agree
Hmm.
with that as well? Great.
Oh, completely.
And so the intuitive part, we're just about to develop that intuitive bit as our guidance system, because that's what I really think intuition is. The first scale of the intuition scale is the guidance system. So if we're going into that guidance system, what is your sort of top tips for helping to kind of probably get rid of some of the conditioning crap that's laying on top, so that you can actually get in there and access our birthright of our own internal guidance system from source?
Yeah, I think you brought up the first thing, which is really paying attention to the physical and our bodies specifically. Like our bodies are telling us things all the time, but most people are not listening to their bodies either on an intuitive level or even in terms of like health, for example, whatever our bodies are telling us in terms of what's happening with our health, diet, etc. So just really learning to pay attention. And even if you don't understand why something is going on in your body, why you're having that intuitive feeling or response, just learning to trust it. And the other piece is learning to kind of check in with it and see if you can develop more information. Because sometimes when you sit with something, you can sort of ask the question. Like I feel like psychic work is really, it's a conversation. It's a psychic conversation instead of a physical conversation. Most people don't realize they don't realize they're getting something. And I'm like, you can ask a question, you can ask for clarification, you can ask for more details. So even if it's just something on a body level, but paying attention to your body, how do things feel in your body, digging in to see if you can get more details on why things are feeling a certain way. And if you even want to just really dig on just to the body language piece, there's a book that I'd recommend for people. It's fascinating. It's called What Every Body is Saying. And it's written by a guy who has worked primarily with law enforcement and the FBI. And he analyzes like body language and facial expression and things like that. And a lot of people, as I got into this, they started to think that maybe I was a mentalist. So if you don't know what a mentalist is someone who is a very keen observer. Now, when I do my readings, I often will close my eyes at least part of the time so that I can see better psychically because I'm a clairvoyant. So like then I'm not looking at the physical. In fact, I do a lot of my readings over the phone where I'm like not even seeing the person physically at all. But I thought that was really interesting. I wanted to learn more about that. Like, how does mentalism work? So basically, it's people that just are these keen observers. The fascinating thing is, I was reading that book, and there are things in the book that they describe, like, when you're like someone, when you like their energy, you want to connect with them, you basically kind of point your body and specifically your feet at that person. And if you don't like that person, you point your feet away. It's a very unconscious thing. Most people aren't aware that they're doing this. So I read this book and started to learn all these different things. And then when I was kind of noticing and observing my own body language, I started to realize that there were certain people that I kind of didn't like energetically, but it wasn't a conscious thing. And I would look at my feet and I'd be like, oh my gosh, my feet are pointed away. So that's an example of how strong it is. And just learning about that, like things like that, and then just really paying attention to how you're feeling in your body emotionally, I think is really, really powerful, as well as physical sensations.
I love that. And I think, yeah, the body is definitely, it's like a tuning fork almost, and
Mhm.
it's in itself is a vibrational instrument. Not only
Completely.
is it a vibrational transmission tower, sending your thoughts out into the ether or the universe, but it is that transmission tower and it's picking up signals all the time. Um, which is why I think there's a lot of people who struggle as empaths, really. And empaths, I find, are probably some of the most unconscious people to start with. They're not aware that they are constantly being bombarded, picking
Yeah.
up other people's emotional signals, and kind of filtering them through their body temple, and then wondering why they, in certain places they feel really wired, and in other places they're like, oh, this is really nice, I feel really relaxed.
Right.
In other places they can just suddenly feel sad and have no idea why. And I've done a lot of work, and you probably find yourself doing a lot of work with people who are empathic but didn't really know that. So they're just like this psychic, I call it like a psychic sponge. They're just like soaking up the vibes, and then an empath who doesn't know that they're an empath will always know that they're an empath if they hear these words. Oh my God, I always feel so great when I'm around you. And I always think, yeah, no,
Oh, yes.
because you're like,
Totally.
pulling any yuck in and then wondering why you feel like a used Capri Sun pouch afterwards. And
Yes.
so, what would you say to help an empath or somebody who's starting to, obviously we've gone in, listening to the body is really important. Same for empaths. But how would you go into that and go a little bit deeper for an empath that's really maybe like starting to wake up to the idea that, hey, wait a minute, maybe all of this emotional stuff is not mine?
Oh my gosh, first of all, that's the biggest realization because I feel like empaths without that understanding, without the tools, without knowing how to manage it, are miserable people. I mean, I look back to before I had my training and I was so unhappy. And it's funny because if you'd asked me, I wouldn't have thought I was unhappy, but it was all I knew, And now that I have my tools and I know how to shift and clear and pay attention and have energy boundaries, I'm like, wow, I was so miserable just because I have that understanding. But I think the first tool is really just paying attention to pattern recognition. How do I feel in this place? How do I feel around this person? How do I feel when I'm doing this activity? And just paying attention. Do I feel good? Do I feel sad? Both during and then afterwards. Do I just feel exhausted after I do a certain thing or hang out with a certain person? This is all information that's telling you something. And I would add that it's not just emotions. I mean, that's what people tend to think of as the emotional empathic aspect, but it's also physical sensations for certain people. Like in my case, I would get physical pains in my body. Like I feel like I manifested other people's headaches or body aches or pains or anxiety attacks, kind of you name it. And so that was a real light bulb moment I had. I didn't have that and figuring that out until I was 30, where I was like, oh my gosh, I've literally been medicating myself for stuff that isn't mine to start with.
Mm.
So I mean, that was profound when I figured that out. And I literally was across the country from my husband at the time. He's now my ex husband, and had basically manifested his panic attack. Like it took me, I had to kind of backtrack to figure out, but I'm literally in this yoga class and I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? Like, I'm not a person who normally has panic or has had panic attacks. It was a very kind of unique thing. And then when I talked with him later, I learned what had happened with him. And I was like, uh, you know, so these kinds of realizations are really important. And interestingly, not just emotions and sensations, but also thought patterns. Like if you
Mhm.
absorb a person's energy, you can take their pattern in. So I had an example where I was teaching a class and then seeing some clients in Washington, DC. And I'm staying at a hotel the night before. And like, I'm not really a person who, like, if I'm single, I'm like happily single. If I meet someone who's great and we align, awesome. But like, I'm not like always looking for a man type of person if I'm single. So, but that night I was like, any man, I was like, are you available? I saw this man who was like in his 60s, like much older than me, not like attractive, heavy drinker, and I was like, maybe he would be with me. Like, and I was like, what is going on? This is so strange. And then the next day I had a client who that was her mindset. And then I realized after that reading, like I had already been energetically connecting with her and I was really picking up and absorbing all of that. So then I was able to kind of like, okay, send that back, clear that energy that I've absorbed. But for empaths, it's really important to understand this stuff because we will have other people's belief systems. We will feel other people's physical pains, we'll feel their emotions. So just that pattern recognition, the first part, and then also learning to clear and release. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that once you have identified something that isn't yours.
Yeah. When I worked professionally as a psychic and medium, I would pick up my clients, like I would go through my roster in the morning and then like suddenly like have back pain, suddenly have like, and I was just picking up them. And sometimes I would feel completely crazy, like so overwhelmed. And I'm like, oh, what's going on? And then the client would sit in my hot seat and you would, and then you'd be like, oh, that's not even mine. Like, I'm not crazy today. This is actually my clients. and,
Totally.
and as soon as I was kind of gave the reading, and it was almost like I kind of took that off me and put it back where it belonged. And it was kind of like, and I'd be like, oh, okay, now it's good. But it was, but it took a long time, I think, to recognize that. And this is why I think working with people like myself and you are so important, because it sounds like you did a lot of the figuring out yourself, which I did as
Yeah.
well, but I think like we cut that learning curve massively, so you don't have to go through years of the craziness. Really understanding, and it's a filter, really beginning to understand what is my energy, what is somebody else's energy, and being able to filter that out. So when you are looking for maybe a teacher to help you with intuition and with psychic abilities, what would you kind of tips, like obviously they can come and check you out and everything, but what tips do you have for finding a teacher that's going to work with somebody?
Yeah, well, when you think about that, working with that person, how does it feel? Do you feel excited? Do you feel heavy? Like these are all things that can be very helpful. Like I do that when choosing a lot of things. I'll literally just tune into that person's like name or their energy frequency and just really pay attention to how is that feeling for me in my body to connect with that person or with that class or workshop or whatever it is that you're looking at. So that's number one, just using your intuition from the start. And then also I feel like sometimes teachers come in and out of our lives at different points. So there may be a point where you go and you feel like you get something, and then suddenly maybe you need a different teacher, or you might be feeling multiple teachers at once, and that's totally fine. So I think it's really important to just honor and trust whatever is coming in terms of that. And I know when I was starting this work, I got a lot of different teachers, and like I would kind of I felt like I got the tools that I needed from that teacher, and then it was like, okay, now it's time to move on. And I sometimes had to fight that urge to be like, this person's been really good for me. And like, I want to continue. And sometimes, that can happen where you have a long-term connection with a particular teacher, but maybe not. And I was kind of like you in the sense that pretty quickly I started to develop a reputation even for like other psychics where I was like reading for other psychics and like seeing things that they didn't even see. And, so even if someone has more experience, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily your teacher or
Mm,
meant to be your teacher. Like it's important to just really pay attention intuitively to whatever you feel is right.
yeah. Yeah, I had that as well, and lots of people, I ended up as like the psychic, which
Yeah.
like no pressure, because you're like, oh my God, feel like every day is an exam day, you're like, but it is about opening up that channel, opening up that conduit. And I like that, you're tapping into that intuition, just using and feeling in your body. Does it feel heavy? Does it feel light? Where am I at with my excitement levels? Am I excited? And I think one of the things that's really important to discuss is the distinction, because I see this a lot in relationships as well. But I think also as well, when you're picking a teacher, am I more in love with the idea of learning the thing than I'm in love with the idea of that teacher?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Because that's an important distinction, isn't it? Because I see some people in relationships and they're more in love with the idea of the relationship than they are in love with the person that they're in the relationship with. And I think sometimes we've got to check in with what is it that we're in love with here. If we're feeling that like, oh, I love this, maybe it's the idea that you love, and maybe the teacher's not the match. So making that distinction, and it is really learning to ask better questions. Would you agree? Like of yourself almost.
Oh my gosh, the asking the questions both for your own intuition as well as a psychic, like a professional psychic, asking the question is almost everything. Because, a lot of people, for example, will ask, should I do this or that? And I'm like, the angels, and the guides don't often respond to those kinds of questions because we have free will, and it's more of the nuance of asking a good question is and very, very helpful in terms of getting an answer that's helpful for you. So yeah, I completely agree. And that's why, if you're like, let's say tuning in, how would it feel to take classes or take this particular class from this particular teacher at this time, and then pay attention to how it sits in your body. And then it might be, well, maybe that teacher's good, but the timing's not right. Or maybe it's just not that teacher at all. And you can, as you start to explore with asking these different questions and paying attention to how things feel in your body, your energy, then a lot of times that provides a lot of clarity just doing that very simple exercise. And trusting. The big thing is a lot of people, like you said, they've loved the idea of something, and so they expect it to like be really good. Like, I love the idea of this, and then I tune in and it feels heavy, but I love the idea, so that must be wrong somehow or something.
Yeah, and it's that just that's it is a very subtle energy, and it's just the subtleness. And I think the difference between a good psychic and a great psychic is that they have a bigger handle on the subtleness. The great psychic
Yep.
has the bigger handle on the subtle nuance of just, it can be just a word that is shifted in a
Yes.
question or something little. That tweak just makes a world of difference with the information that starts to come through. So let's talk about when information starts coming through. Obviously, we've talked about the body and feeling it in the body. You've talked about clairvoyance. That's clear seeing. So it's a French for clear seeing and being able to see pictures. What other psychic abilities, obviously, can people experience? Because clairvoyance is just the tip of a very huge iceberg.
Yeah, and even with clairvoyance, there's so many different ways that can manifest. So it's funny because, like, when I meet someone who doesn't really know about psychic stuff and they ask what I do, and I tell them, they often will do one of two things. They'll ask me to read their aura, which I don't do, or read their palm, which I also don't do. So it's like, not that the palm reading is clairvoyance necessarily, but that even clairvoyance can manifest in a lot of different ways. Do you see colors? Do you see, spirits? Do you see angels? Do you see colors? Do you see, there's lots of different ways that can manifest. And then of course there's the empathic kind of clairsentience, feeling information in your body. And then telepathy, so getting thoughts coming in. And that can be from your angels and spirit guides. It could also be picking up on thoughts from other people. And this was really confusing for me growing up because I would sometimes, in fact, I still do it now, just answer people's unasked questions to the point where I didn't even realize that they hadn't asked the question. Like, it was like they'd said it and then I'd answer it, and then they give me this weird look like, how did you know I was thinking that or wondering that or whatever? And then there's...
Oh, I know that look.
Oh yeah, totally. And then there's clairaudience, which is like hearing. And with clairaudience, I feel like sometimes people hear it in their mind's eye or in their mind. And sometimes it's literally almost like they literally hear it, except it's not a physical source. And then there's psychometry, like getting information through touch, through picking things. I mean, there's so many different ways that a lot of these abilities come in. And then there's one that are like more rare, clairgustance, like psychic tasting, or clairalience, psychic smelling. And like I have that every once in a while, but it's not something that comes in like all the time. But when it does, it's really fascinating to me.
Yeah. The old school used to be that you could only have like one, and if you were really lucky, you would have two clairs. I think because the consciousness on the planet has risen so much, I am seeing many more psychics. I mean, I have all of the clairs open and available to me. I get clairalience, clairgustance, claircognizance, which is clear knowing, clairsentience, which is clear feeling. Clairvoyance was my strongest as well to begin with, but
Yeah.
clairaudience now as well, which is where you hear spirit. And so now it's kind of multi-sensory experience. But I think the consciousness of the planet has risen so much that these psychic abilities are now heightened in a way. And let's talk a little bit about the kind of the raising of the vibes, really, because I think that's really what's happening. Now, my spirit team really kind of say that kind of meditation and yoga are to blame for this because of the mainstream of them having to actually become mainstream, and that's really helped the population to raise their frequency as a collective, which means that we're now closer to where these frequencies and energies are available, so they're easier for us to download. What's your experience of how things have shifted, obviously, because you've been in this kind of, let's call it a game, for quite some time. So
Yeah.
how have you seen the things shifting and evolving, if you like?
Yeah, I think there's a massive shift that's still continuing. I mean, it's still in process. And we've been going
Absolutely.
from these kind of very dense, very kind of earthbound, heavy energies to a much lighter energy. And I think one of the things that's happening now, where we're seeing lots of intense kind of things coming up and conflict and fear, is that as the vibration rises up, anything that's not aligned with that higher vibration really shows up, and it shows up hard to be healed, cleared, and released. And so I think that's what we're seeing both on a collective kind of
Mm,
societal level as well as individually. So if there's things coming up and like that are like, wow, that's intense or that's a lot, it's because there's something for us to address, heal, shift, and release. And I completely agree with you about kind of mindfulness, meditation, yoga. And then I think honestly, information too, because, it didn't used to be possible for us to even have conversations about a lot of these things and connect with each other and our abilities. And there's such a power in community and connection and learning from each other. And I think the technology, the internet, free flow of information and educational resources like books and access to all that stuff has really helped because the information provides a new context and helps us shift and see things in a different perspective. So I think it's multifaceted, but I completely agree that it's happening and things are getting lighter and lighter. But there's also this kind of rapid learning curve that's happening and releasing that's happening as a result of this rising vibration that the whole planet is going through.
yeah, I definitely feel like we're going through a huge shift, and it is absolutely agree that it's ongoing at the moment. We're like kind of, I feel like we're smack bang in the middle of, and it's just going to
Yeah.
keep expanding. Intuition. Let's get into this because it's such an exciting subject. Now, I could not imagine living my life without intuition. Like all my decisions are made from an intuitive point and things like that. It's literally like having a guidance system. I teach others how to try different energies on before you've even committed to an energy,
Yes.
which is
Mhm.
so fun. Um, I mean, let's talk some of the results of your clients and things like that that you've had, people that have maybe come, because I know you have worked with a celebrity clientele and you work with like executives and everything like that. So this is really game changing in the business world. Intuition, I mean, literally is the leading edge.
It really is. And it's so interesting because I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of very high level business people consult with psychics, whether or not it's publicly stated. And that's also happened like high level politics, like leaders basically in many different fields are doing this. And it's starting to get more out in the open, but it's still kind of hush hush. And I have some very high level business leaders that work with me regularly. And they're like, I can't say my psychic told me. And I'm like, well, here's what, I'll tell them like, this is what you say instead. Like, this is the reason why, or whatever. But I think it is interesting. A lot of very successful people are doing this. A lot of Hollywood people, like this, there's this phrase, expression, like everyone in LA has a psychic. And in a way, it's
Or
true. Like,
speed
it's
dial.
very, very common thing. And look at how much money is, so how much material wealth is in that part of the world as well. So yeah, it's a very common thing. And I have a recent like billionaire client, for example, who's super into all of this. And I just want to let people know that I feel like there's this idea that like there's kind of financial success and like business over here. And then over here is like the woo woo and intuition. I'm like, no, those that I really learned how to bridge those two are the ones that are very successful. And I also feel like a lot of very successful business people are naturally intuitive, whether or not they've had any training. They just
Yeah.
kind of like, they
Yeah.
can just navigate so easily and naturally in the highs and lows of, societal changes and things like that, and always come out on top. So
Well,
yeah, I
Steve
think it's
Jobs was well documented at being, he was a meditator, meditated a lot. He got all of his ideas came literally through meditation, the medium of meditation. It was, and you can see how, like, you know, regular mobile phone, iPhone, and it was like, it was a quantum leap.
oh my
And
gosh.
that's where the spirit world really comes into its own, because it's where the quantum leaps live. And I love that you've also said about them, the businessmen, because I think there's this low level of business where they kind of ignore their intuition, but the
Yes.
high level is like they're all over the intuition part. I mean, I
Yeah.
worked as a corporate psychic, so I'd sit in meetings as a secretary, taking notes,
Oh,
reading
I love
energy.
that.
And but I had like these big non-disclosure, was not allowed to, like, barely allowed to mention that I actually did that for people, and things like that. So this is, and these companies would shock you if you knew who they were, that they would hire
Yes.
like.
Yes, completely. Yeah.
And so it is incredible, because I think, when we look at, and you can walk down the high street and see some of the offices that the head offices of these businesses that I sat in on board meetings, like, just ignore me, just sitting little secretary in the corner while I read everybody's intentions in the room for big deals, like $1 million deals or £1 million deals and things. And I
Yep.
think, there is this idea that the business is separate. And then the woo woo is like, oh, they're all so weird and woo out there. But actually, it is those top people that are in the top rungs of our society that have attained incredible wealth and business savvy in the business world, that are employing really the extrasensory perception that is intuition. And I think that's
Yeah.
a really important thing, because I think there's this idea of the woo woo being kind of, in fact, Colette Baron Reid always says, don't poo poo the woo woo.
I love that. That's great. That's a great, I'm gonna
Which
write
is
that
so
down.
true, which is so true. Um, and I love it. And but it is a lot of the ones in the know, they know, and
Yes.
they have a psychic on speed dial and are willing to trust this information. And I think that's a key as well, is trust. And it starts with self-trust. Let's talk a little bit about that as well, because self-trust is so key to this.
Absolutely. And yeah, just your point, a lot of the really successful business people do this. And I don't do this for all my clients, but certain high level clients, like they have my cell number and they just can text me and like we could just, go as needed. But yeah, that self trust is really important. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge for people when they're first learning to access their intuition and psychic abilities is trusting something even when logically it makes no sense or it may seem against what they want in the bigger picture. I do think it's something that over time you learn to trust it because you see what happens when you listen and when you don't. And it is like a muscle. I think that trust. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. And I had some very clear examples like early on for both listening and not listening that made it really clear why it's important to listen. So in one case, this is before I was working as a psychic, but I would always get these intuitive hits. And I one day just really I would go out to these nightclubs all the time when I was young, and I just had a great time. I loved to dance and be social. And then one night I was like, really just didn't feel like I should go, but I wanted to go. Like, I really wanted to go out, and so I did. And it turned out so horribly for me. Like, my jacket was stolen, which had my car keys, which, it was the keys to my company car. And then my checkbook was in the car. So like I got investigated at work. The car was stolen. Then they forged checks with my checkbook, and like for a whole year I had to go to the bank and do like affidavits of forgery to like clear my name that like I didn't originate these bad checks. So I mean, it was something that like literally for an entire year had like major ramifications for my life. So that was when I didn't listen. And then another example was when I was at this point I had just started my psychic business, and I kept getting these messages to do readings at a local coffee shop. And I was still like pretty private. Like I just kind of had my coming out of the psychic closet, and like didn't really want to be public like that. Like I was like, no, I just want to be like little private, do my readings, at my house or whatever. And I finally listened and put up the flyer in the window of the coffee shop. And that same day that I put it up, the managing editor of the local newspaper asked if he could write a story about me. And I'd been asking and praying for help with my business because it was brand new. I just like, no one knew me in this area. I mean, I'd been working in politics and government prior to this. So it was really out of left field for people that knew me. And 2 days later, it was in the regional newspaper, like an article with me, color photo, like explaining what I did, and my phone started to ring. So it didn't make sense because I didn't really want to do that thing, but I really wanted the results of what that thing brought me. And it was totally worth it. Like that minor discomfort and kind of uncomfortableness that I had for kind of putting myself out there was so worth what came forward. So, I think at first, if you just are getting guided to do something or feel something intuitively, just try it and see. And a lot of times, whatever we think is the bad thing that's going to happen out of it is much bigger in our mind than it actually would, or we wouldn't be getting the guidance to do it in the first place.
Yeah. I think that's a real killer for intuition. I call it the written in stone energy. We think often that things are written in stone. It's like it's permanent. It's not going anywhere. So if I make this decision, that's it. It's the only decision I can make. And we put so much on that little decision's shoulders. It's so heavy. Instead of saying, okay, well, I can make this decision, but if it sucks, I can make another one. But instead we don't do that. We don't give ourselves permission for that. So instead it's like, it's got to be so right. And also as well, what you were talking about there is another energy that I call the unfoldment. And we never know how something is going to unfold. Yes. And again, if we're really attached to the written in stone energy, we can't go through what I call the great unfoldment. So just because you didn't want to go to the coffee shop, that could have blocked the unfoldment of the press, that then probably led to more press and probably led to more clients, and like built, because you actually have one of the top 100 podcasts as well. So, like this, you can see how those little bricks probably built that amazing road that you've been on. But it's if we don't go with the initial intuition and we block it, because we're like, no, I'm not a psychic for coffee shops.
Right. This is private, or it's serious, or, whatever. Yeah, I think that a lot of times we get in our own way because let's say we want an end goal or we have a vision for a life and we get an intuitive feeling and we don't want some aspect of that. If we don't realize that it's basically when we get these intuitive hits, that it's basically guiding us towards our dream life or the things that we want. And absolutely that newspaper article was quite important for me actually, because it was my first media coverage as a professional psychic, and it led to many other things, television opportunities. And if you Google me, or you can find my television reel online, I've done a lot. Like I was featured by Buzzfeed. I've been on these television shows, including like some nationally syndicated shows with regular appearances. I was on Will Ferrell's podcast. I mean, like big stuff. But once you get media, it's so much easier to get more. So like having that one, even local newspaper article was a really big deal for me.
I love that. And I love how, and how it unfolds, because that's how it unfolds. Right. I think a lot of us think, well, I just want the direct route to where I want to go.
Right.
And life doesn't look like that, because it's a bit more like a kind of big winding road as opposed to a straight line. And no more prevalent is that than in the entrepreneurial world, where we're all over the place. Like, we can go from, oh my God, I am the most worst entrepreneur in the world in the morning, to like, I am the greatest. By the afternoon. It's
Totally.
quite an emotional journey. But I think, we want to go the straight line, and the logical mind wants to take us in the straight line, and often it doesn't work like that. It's a chance meeting. It's somebody who spots something. It is like that guy, just seeing that poster in that coffee shop is such a beautiful experience, like example of what Skylar, my spirit team, call the great unfoldment, of like how everything unfolds for us. And within this $1 million experiment that we're doing, there's going to be an unfoldment, and it's going to make no sense. Some of it is going to make no sense. And yet, if we trust that deeper intuition,
Right.
and we go with it, we're going to end up like somewhere completely brand new, and be like, oh my God, now I realize, like, that thing that I was in resistance to actually opened the door to that, which then opened the door to this, which then opened the door to this over here. And boom, here's the result that I wanted.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times these things can come in not the way that we expect, like in the sort of more linear process oriented system, that it would take, like, you have to do A, B, C, D, F, G, X, Y, Z, all the way to get to Z. And now it's like, oh no, you can just skip from like one all the way to the other. And then we may not know exactly what those steps are going to be for ourselves, but it's possible for things to come in super fast. Like, I had incredibly fast shifts come in, and did I think that they would happen like that? Not necessarily, but they did. So, not to get set in your mind in terms of how these things come in, and also just to pay attention to the guidance that you're getting, because you may end up going from like A to Z in like 60 seconds instead of 60 years, how it used to.
So I have got some quick fire questions for you from our audience at the $1 Million Experiment. So the first one comes from Ruby Coop, and she is saying, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
What's coming to mind is not necessarily a piece of advice, but it's more something that I heard recently that I think really helped me reframe everything, which is that reality is simply like, it's our agreement. So whatever our beliefs are just an agreement that we have with reality. And if we don't like that reality, we can just change it. We can just change our beliefs, and then the reality changes. And it's kind of profound to think about it that way, but just like, change your agreement. Like, I don't agree to that reality, whatever that is. And then there's different tools that you can use to help on a sort of deeper level to shift your beliefs, to get more in line with what you want them to be. Because we all inherit beliefs from our families, from society, as a whole, and even from past lives. And then we can totally reprogram them so that because if we have beliefs that are fighting what we want to create, it can feel a lot harder to bring it in. But if we shift the beliefs, and these things can come in like really fast and easily.
Yes. Oh, I agree with that. I love that. I love that it's an agreement. It totally is, isn't it? Because, I mean, you've aligned to the belief, so you agreed with the belief, but the belief has got an end result. It plays out.
Right.
So Susanna Butcher says, what are your essential daily habits?
So I do several different things, and not necessarily each one I do every day, but I do most of these things pretty frequently. One of them is I am always writing down lists of gratitudes. I just think when you're coming from that place of gratitude, even if you feel like you're in a tough spot for whatever reason, emotionally, physically, financially, whatever that is that's challenging right now, when you get into that gratitude space, it just really helps you with kind of shifting your mindset and your energy. The other one is I'm always asking the angels for help. I'm a huge fan of angels and praying to them and asking for their divine support. And the other thing that I have moments where I do more of and less of is tapping. Like, I really feel like tapping is so beneficial for one of those tools to help clear our beliefs and kind of trapped emotions in the body.
And I think tapping is a great diagnostic tool. If you don't know what's really underneath something, you're maybe just caught in the fear of it on the top. But if you start tapping, usually the thought that originated that surface
Yeah,
fear reveals itself through the tapping.
completely.
So, Iris Van Oyen is saying, what is the most unexpected thing you believe has contributed to your success thus far?
I think it's learning to sort of practice that faith and then manifesting muscle, and just learning to sort of take that leap or take that step, even if it was maybe on the surface something that I didn't think that I wanted to do or was scary. So it's just been a process. And when I first started consciously manifesting, like I think we're manifesting all the time, right? But when I started like really writing it down and being clear, like what do I want to bring in, I was shocked at how specific it was. So I think that clarity of like calling things in very purposefully and
Mm,
being clear about what it is that you're wanting is very, very helpful because it's kind of like, putting in that navigation in your car. If you just, you can just kind of drive around and see where you go and see what you discover, and that can be fun. But if there's some place, a destination you want to see, you better put that in the navigation. So I feel like that sort of conscious manifesting and
mm.
working on that. And it's a process. It's not like, oh, I did it and I'm done. It's like literally a daily, thing you're always doing.
Thank you so much for coming here and having this amazing conversation with us. I have loved getting into the intuition part. I have loved getting into all of your journey as well, and just hearing about your childhood and how it's developed, and just sharing this with our listeners. Do you have a little bit of advice that you would love to give people just to finish up with?
Yeah, I'm just feeling to say that you can be so much more than what you've been taught, and that we're taught to be very small or that we are small and powerless. And by the way, being small is not necessarily the same thing as being powerless, but we tend to associate that,
Mhm.
that even relatively small in the picture of the world, that we can have such a huge impact. And you look at like a regular bomb, and yeah, it could cause an explosion, but you know what causes the biggest explosion of all? An atomic bomb, which is the tiniest little piece of matter. So even when we feel very small, we can have such an incredible impact on the world, for good or for ill, hopefully. Hopefully for good, but just to remember that your own power, what you're capable of. And if you find yourself feeling that you are powerless, or maybe scaling down what you're wanting to create for yourself or bring in, just know that that is one of those false kind of beliefs with reality, false agreements that you have with reality. And you can just change that, and then you can become the sort of rock star version of yourself, whatever that is. That's going to be different for different people, but we all have an incredible ability to make a huge impact on the world, and of course on our own lives as well.
Wow, thank you so much. I love that bit of advice. And I am going to make sure that I pop into the show notes how you can get hold of Laura Powers, and we'll pop in all her links. But just give us a quick link, Laura, so how people can find you quickly if they're like, oh, I don't even have time for the show notes. I need to go and see where this lady is.
Sure. So my psychic website is healingpowers.net. So it's tied in with my last name. And my Instagram handle is Laura Powers 44. So you can feel free to send me a DM on there, follow, send me a DM. My email is bookings at laurapowers.net if you have specific questions. And then I also have my page on Facebook at Healing Powers. So feel free to connect with me, whichever platform that you're in. I love to hear from people. It's really fun to connect. And thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure. I love you and your energy, and thank you for this amazing space that you've created.
Thank you.